Okay, readers, welcome back. So for today's read aloud, we are going to be working on identifying the problems in the story and using our ability to retell important parts of the story by looking at the characters, events in the story, the setting, the problem, and the solution to really help us understand if whether or not the problem we thought was the main problem in the story really was the heart of what was the conflict in the story that we are reading today. And identifying the problems in the story is really important because conflicts or problems often drive the stories. Characters are motivated to do something, get something, or figure something out. And it's important as readers to pay attention to how problems are solved and the steps that the characters take to solve their problems. So for today's read aloud, we are going to be reading Charlotte the Scientist is Squished. And as we're reading the story, I really want you to think about what exactly is the problem that Charlotte is having and really consider the steps that she takes to solve her problem. Are you ready to do this work with me? Great. Okay. Charlotte the Scientist is Squished, written by Camille Andros, illustrated by Brian Farley. Charlotte the Scientist is Squished by Camille Andros, illustrated by Brian Farley. Charlotte was a serious scientist. Protective glasses, a lab coat, and a magnifying glass were her essential scientific equipment, plus a clipboard for important notes. Charlotte solved problems by conducting experiments that followed the scientific method. Readers, I wonder if this is going to give us a clue as to maybe how Charlotte is going to solve not just science-based problems, but personal problems as well. And Charlotte had a problem. She was squished. Now, readers, let's think. What could that word mean? Squished. Well, squish was in the title of the story. And from what I'm gathering, readers, being squished sounds like a problem. But let's think. Why would being squished be such a problem? Could you turn and talk and tell the person next to you as to why do you think this is a big problem for Charlotte? Okay, well, let's come back together. So readers, I'm thinking that Charlotte might consider being squished a big problem because being squished, from what I'm gathering in the picture, means she might not have enough space. And from what I remember seeing in the first picture, she seems to have a lot of things that are sensitive, a lot of things as a scientist that are easily breakable. And I'm looking at her family, and there seems to be a lot of little brothers and sisters that don't understand personal space. And I think that's part of the problem that she's having. Did you say something similar in your conversations? Okay, well, let's keep on reading and see what exactly Charlotte does. She was squished at the table. She was squished in the tub. And sometimes she was even squished on the toilet. Hey! Oh, readers, look, she doesn't even get to have privacy when she's going to the restroom. But I can kind of understand that because if that's really the case where there's only one restroom for that entire family, I can imagine that you don't really get any privacy in a home like that. It had become impossible to conduct her experiments. Her test tubes were broken, her beakers got broken, and her specimens were spoiled. Charlotte needed some space, time to use the scientific method. Step 1. Ask a question. How can I get some space around here? Oof. Readers, that question was not just full of emotion. I could really tell from the picture that she was feeling extremely frustrated. Can you tell that? Just look at the picture, look at her expression on that face, look at her clenched fist. You can tell that she's feeling frustrated or possibly angry, not just by how she's yelling out her question, but really her expression and the colors in the picture. That red background also adds to my understanding as to how she's feeling. Step 2, form a hypothesis. Hypothesis. If I can get rid of my brothers and sisters, I will have room to be a real scientist. Step 3, test the hypothesis. Experiment. She tried an experiment to make everyone disappear. Oh, readers, I wonder what she put in there. But it didn't work. She tried another experiment to make herself disappear. Oh, do you see, readers, what she's doing there in that picture? She seems to be studying what makes chameleons special, and so it looks like she's trying to camouflage herself so that no one can find her. But that didn't work either. Oh, readers, and she worked so hard on doing all that research too. Bang, clang, boom, keep out. If she was going to get some space, she would have to go there. Readers, look what she did. She traveled all the way out to outer space. Just looking at this picture and thinking back to how she was feeling before, comparing those two emotions and looking at the change in her mood, how do you think Charlotte is feeling right now? What do you think might be going through her head? Could you turn and talk and have a quick conversation with the person next to you about that? How do you think Charlotte is feeling now, and what might be going through her head? Okay, well, let's come back together. So, it seems to me, readers, that her feelings have changed really drastically. Before, she was feeling not only as if her personal space was being violated, like she didn't have any room to be by herself, and then to feeling really angry and frustrated when she came up with the idea of making everyone disappear. Now, if you look at her expression, she feels joyful, truly elated and excited that she finally gets to have all the personal space that she has ever dreamed of. Step 4, make and record observations. Charlotte was no longer squished at the table. She was no longer squished in the tub, and Charlotte could take as long as she wanted on the toilet. Observations, meals, check. Baths, check. Toilet, check. Important experiments. Space was splendid. Oh, she thinks it's such a wonderful experience to be by herself. Look at her. Finally! Step 5, draw conclusions. She had all the room she needed to conduct very important experiments using her protective glasses, lab coat, and magnifying glass. Her test tubes were tidy, her beakers looked brilliant, and her specimens were sparkling. Her hypothesis was correct. She finally had room to be a scientist. The only problem was there was no one to talk to at mealtime, no one to blow bubbles with in the tub. And what was Charlotte supposed to do when she ran out of toilet paper? Hello? Space was lonely. Oh, readers, I can really empathize with this. Can you? I mean, with the toilet paper shortage of 2020, who couldn't? But really, let's just think about what has been happening in the story over the past few pages, over these past few pictures. Because it seems to me from my observations that Charlotte's mood is changing yet again. She was so happy to be by herself in space, having all that room to be a real scientist. But now it looks like she's reflecting, like she's thinking back, and that she didn't really possibly think about how lonely it would be to be by herself, especially coming from such a big family. I don't think she really thought about how lonely it would feel. What do you think might happen next? Can you make a quick prediction as to what she might do next? Okay, let's check our thinking. Back to step 2. Form a new hypothesis. Oh, well, this makes sense, readers, because scientists sometimes, when they have problems, they come up with ideas, and then when those ideas don't exactly work out, they go back and come up with new ideas. So it makes sense for her to go back to step 2. If I can have friends in space, then I won't be lonely and I can be a real scientist. Time for more experiments. Charlotte tried chocolate, but it was too tempting. The balloons kept floating away. Oh, readers, look, it looks like she wanted to try and have a party by herself so that she wouldn't feel so lonely. But that didn't seem to work out. And row-up bunnies were poor conversationalists. They got ruined in the bathtub and tangled in the toilet paper. Boop, boop, boop. Charlotte missed her family. She even missed being squished. So she tried one last experiment. I wonder what that could be. Oh, readers, look, she's coming back home. And the rest of her family is so excited to have her back. Look at their faces. And reached a new conclusion. Charlotte didn't need outer space. She just needed her own space. So readers, now that we've finished the story, let's think back to the comprehensional skills we said we were going to use to help us think a little bit more deeply as to what the problem possibly was in the story. Because right off the bat, I think even just from reading the title and looking at the first few pages, we might have made the inference that Charlotte's problem was that she was squished. But let's again use our ability to retell a story to think a little bit more deeply and really think as to whether or not that was the real problem in the story. Ready? Okay. So when we retell a story, we have to look at the characters. So in this case, our character or our characters are Charlotte and her family. And some of the important events that happened in the story were that Charlotte was trying to conduct a whole bunch of experiments to get some space at home. And when those didn't work out, another important event was that she made that carrot rocket ship and went into outer space. But then she kind of made some more experiments when she was up in space as to figure out how not to be so lonely. But then when that didn't work out, another event that happened was that she went back home. So now let's think about the setting. Ready? So where did this story take place? It took place at her home in outer space, and then it seemed to go back home, right? Now let's think a little bit deeply as to what the real problem, what the real conflict of the story was. Because yes, I'm pretty sure not just you, but I also made the same inference that the main problem in the story at the beginning was going to be that Charlotte was squished, that she didn't have enough space. But thinking back as to the characters, the events, and the setting, it didn't seem like the problem of the story was that she didn't have enough space, but that she really wanted to find her own space, how to balance wanting to be by herself, but also balancing wanting to be with her family. She didn't seem to know how to do that. And that, I think, was the real problem in the story. Because if you think about what she did at the end of the story to fix her problem, she used her rocket ship to be able to be close to her family, but at the same time have a space that was private, that was all her own. So, did you see, readers, how we were able to identify the real problem of the story? By using our ability to retell, look at the characters, event, setting, and then think deeply as to what the problem and solutions were in the story. Don't forget to do that often when you read your books and you sense that there's a problem that you can identify in the story, because remember, again, conflicts often drive stories, and it is important as readers for us to pay attention to how problems are solved and the steps that the characters take to solve their problems. Okay, well, before I close off this read aloud, again, sometimes in our videos we're going to have extra credit assignments. So for today's extra credit assignment, if you were able to get to the end, I want you to try to come up with as many synonyms, that means words that mean the same thing, for the word splendid. Do you remember hearing that in the story near the middle part? So splendid. So think and try to come up with as many synonyms for splendid. So try to come up with as many words that mean the same thing as splendid. Do you think you can do that? Great. So again, thank you for reading with me today. I can't wait to read with you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.